Okay, so it looks like we have some attendees pouring in. So thank you everyone for joining us for this workshop. Before we officially start, I'm going to go over some directions on how to interact during this session. So workshops are using either Zoom webinars or Zoom meetings. So the best way to ask questions and participate in the session are posted in the public chat bar to the right. The session organizers will also let you know how they would like you to interact with them. So use the public chat bar on the right side of the screen for general comments or conversation with all participants. If you are having connectivity issues or would prefer to interact with the session directly in Zoom, you can find a link under the video screen by clicking the Experiencing Issues box. As a reminder, participants in this section are expected to abide by the Society for Ecological Restoration Code of Conduct. We ask that you help foster an atmosphere of inclusiveness by showing respect and courtesy to presenters and other delegates. Now I'll turn it over to our workshop hosts.
Thank you, Monique. Hi, everyone. I am Stephanie Frischi, and I'm joined with co-organizers Nancy Shaw and Stefan Weber. We're with the International Network for Seed-Based Restoration, which is a thematic section of SER. And we want to welcome you to workshop number 9, Networks and Other Strategies for Developing Native Seed Supply to Meet Restoration Needs. Let me just get my display here. We've got 7 different presenters joining us here. Each represents a regional network in their part of the world. And our schedule for today will be a round robin kind of lightning round, where each of these presenters shares just an overview in a 7-minute presentation about their network. And we've got networks that are pretty young or new with fewer members, and we've got more established networks. So we'll be hearing from a variety of different experiences. And then item number 8 here is how we're going to spend the final 40 minutes of our hour and a half together, with a Q&A period, just time for discussion and networking, where we can learn from each other and hopefully support those of you who are involved in or creating native seed networks where you are, and learn from each other. So with that, I would like to invite our first presenter. We have Robert Sissons from Parks Canada, and he'll be talking about the Southern Alberta Native Seed Collaborative.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. I will do my best to share. I think I'm just waiting for it to load. Or can you see the screen yet?
It looks good to me, Robert.
Oh, okay. I'm not. I'm getting a little glitch on my end, but that's okay. So thank you, everybody. I'm Robert Sissons. I'm an ecologist with Waterton Lakes National Park in Alberta, and I'm going to talk to you about our fledgling Southwest Alberta Native Seed Collaborative. So we are one of the babies of the group, perhaps. So before I begin, I just want to acknowledge that we are in the traditional territories of the Siksika-Sitsapi, the Blackfoot Confederacy, which consists of the Kainai, Piikani, Siksika, and Anskapi Piikani nations. This area falls within Treaty 7 territory, which also includes the Tsuut'ina Nation and Stoney Nakoda. The Ktunaxa Nation and the Métis Nation Region 3 Association also consider this area as being within their traditional homelands. The lands and waters of the Waterton region have been used for millennia by Indigenous peoples for sustenance, ceremony, trade, and travel, and we thank them for their continuous stewardship and for sharing the land with us. So where is our group located? So in a North America context, We are at the junction of British Columbia, province of British Columbia on the west side, Alberta, and Montana to the south. So if we look in the natural region map on the bottom, Waterton Lakes National Park is at the very bottom left of that natural region. And our group is focused primarily on the montane grasslands, which is the purple, foothills parklands, the brown, and then the foothills fescue, the pink zone. So that is our focus area. And just some rationale about why this group initiated, and I suspect this will be a common theme. To begin with, there is difficulty in acquiring locally sourced native seed in quantities required to effect restoration in the region. And additionally, bumper crops of desired species are missed due to inadequate resources to harvest, and that is on a region by region or agency by agency basis. So even though our current methods of collecting by hand, either singly as we can or with volunteer groups, can still have some tangible results. Ultimately, the volume of seed we can collect using this process or on our own is limited. Additionally, issues with seed quality, invasive species, and unknown provenance in commercial supply is affecting our ability or our effective restoration. The provenance is that seed is not necessarily harvested or grown within our region and may not be climatically suitable for our region. Also, incorrect species identification and commercial seed supply is a huge issue. So what you're buying may not be actually what you're getting. A prime example of that is Rocky Mountain fescue, which is Festuca saximontana. Inevitably is a sheep fescue variety, so Festuca ovina type, which is an introduced species. So who is this group? So was initiated in 2018 due to the rationale I just described. So Castle Provincial Park, which is located just to the north of Waterton, the municipal district of Ranchlands, which is a large ranching community area just to the north of Castle and a bit to the west, and Waterton Lakes National Park. We got together to try and see how we could maybe share resources on all things related to restoration, seed supply being one major issue. We've now expanded our membership to include the Nature Conservancy of Canada, which controls a lot of the land in this area, or a fair amount of land. We have nations, the Piikani and the Kainai nations, Alberta Agriculture, the Waterton Biosphere Association, and we have private land managers and commercial native seed collectors and producers. So we have a great foundation. The right people are at the table. A diversity of minds and thoughts are there. And our membership is ultimately open to anyone that has a need for native seed or has jurisdiction over lands where native seed may be collected, or has expertise in native seed collecting. Essentially, anyone. We are quite open. And we're all operating under the umbrella of the Grasslands Restoration Forum, which is the leading authority on restoration in grasslands environments throughout Alberta. And I highly recommend visiting that link to them. So our vision, to serve as a network for the sharing of knowledge, equipment, person power, and seed that will further the goal of building a reliable, high quality native seed source for restoration projects in Southwestern Alberta. So some of our planned activities, as I said, we're quite young, and so we're building the shell or the foundation. We've got the right people at the table, and now we have ideas on how we want to, how this group wants to sort of behave, I guess, over the time. So ideally is resource sharing, equipment, staff, seed cleaning and storage. Some of us have great seed storage facilities. Some of us have seed cleaning facilities. Some of us have seed collecting machinery and just more staff perhaps. So interagency access to harvestable areas and joint harvesting events. So if I have a great bumper crop of species that we're interested in, then we can have a session that everybody can come and collect. Collaborative development of education materials for internal and public distribution. And exploring alternate seed harvesting and propagation models. So use of native haying, the renting of a greenhouse to help reduce cost overall if we do a joint renting. And then the grow and share programs with local farmers that can help us multiply our seed supply. And then development and adaptation of consistent methodologies, including collaborative training events. So we all know we're all doing the same thing at the same time, I guess, and understanding when seed is perfect for harvesting. That is an art form in itself. So that's us in a nutshell. That is the Southwest Alberta Native Seed Collaborative. We are just beginning, and hopefully through this workshop we'll learn how other groups and others in this workshop have implemented their native seed strategies. There are questions around how do we share that seed resource even between agencies and even to get it out into the commercial market if possible. So this last slide just is to signify that we're always looking ahead and looking forward. So thank you. That's it for today.
Fantastic. Thank you for that first presentation, Robert. And again, I've just put in the chat a link to a Google Doc that you should all have access to, and where our presenters have more of a description of their network and other links as well. Next up, I'd like to introduce Eduardo Malta Camposville of the Shingu Native Seed Network in Brazil. Welcome, Eduardo.
Thank you, Stephanie, and all the organizers. Thank you very much. I will be presenting here. I am a biologist working in Brazil with ecological restoration for 20 years now. I'll just present. So our work started by a request of the indigenous people living in the Shingu region for centuries, and they felt that the water was getting dirt as a result of the illegal deforestation outside the boundaries of their territories. So we started a campaign in order to make ecological restoration, mainly on riparian areas of the Shingu River basin. And we found a very difficult situation with no nurseries and difficulty to plant seedlings as is conventionally done in Brazil and many other places. So we asked, what are you going to do? And we talked a lot and asked that question to indigenous people who know all about the native species, and with the farmers who came to that region to plant soy and corn, rice, and know all about modern technologies for direct seeding. And then we did the Muvuka system, which means planting seeds directly in the ground, in the soil of the degraded area we wanted to recover. And we can use planters from agriculture, or we can use limestone broadcast machines, or we can plant it by hand in holes, or broadcasting in agroforestry, many different systems. Here's some images of how we can do. This is the mix of seeds that we calculate for each ecosystem regarding all important ecological groups, from herbs to trees. And then how it grows in a very high density with some herbs and shrubs making the initial coverage and trees growing below it and then taking cover. So we've planted already 6,500 hectares with seeds from Shingu Seed Network, and led to the creation and the need for organizing the production of native seeds. So the Shingu Seed Network works searching and planning the demand for seeds for restoration projects, and most recently for cosmetics as well. And then we do the community plan production with local and regional reunions, meetings, and technical workshops. And also we connect to other seed networks, and we do have a rotative fund in order to the collectors to get loans with for structure and materials for seed production. And we also always assess traditional knowledge and take the best advantage of their links to science production in order to deliver seeds adequately and good genetics to restoration projects. So we are already 15 years treading this path, and we passed from 5 collectors in 2007 to more than 500 collectors right now, most of them women. From 1 ton of seeds sold in 2007 to a total of 250 tonelads of seeds sold until now, generating more than $1 million to those families. So we buy for ecosystem keepers who value and preserve native vegetation. We plan production regarding their social conditions, and knowledge. And we work on a new positive relationship between those social actors. And we find that it's important for this kind of work to happen and have success, to have permanence in a territory, and to build local pacts and transparent governance in order to build trust through diversity. And we mean not only biodiversity, but mainly social diversity. And that it's an incremental process that you have to be patient with. So ecological restoration takes a long time, and social transformations also take a long time. And to make a production organization and communities is also a process of social transformation. Some other seed networks have appeared in Brazil during the last 10 years, and many of them in different regions of Brazil, inspired on the work of Shingu Seed Network, and they are getting more and more connected right now, forming like a big network of networks. And we need for advancing that work with local communities for seed collection, and also we need seed technology for applied research for that to develop better. We have landowners plant and showcase to their peers on the region, and we need capacity building for field assistance to that for that to happen. And we need to include native trees in agricultural systems, and starting from where the farmer is key for that. And we need to develop native products economy, and for that we need marketing and investment expertise, as well as biologists, ecologists, and forest. Here's some of our partners. Thank you very much. We'll be here to answer questions in a while. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Eduardo. It's great to learn a little bit about the Shingu Seed Network and know that there are so many other networks in Brazil that are following that model and covering other regions of the country.
Thank you very much.
Next, thank you. Next, we have Joanneke Bijkerk from the Netherlands, and she is the president and representative of the European Native Seed Producers Association. And I will be sharing her presentation. Let's make sure we've got a good view here.
Hello, my name is Joanneke Bijkerk. I'm the current president of Enspa, the European Native Seed Producers Association. I would like to thank you for inviting us to your congress and explain about Enspa and what we are all about. I also have a company producing and selling local native seeds called Kruidhoek, which translated would be herb corner. So why did we start with Enspa? There's several reasons, really. One very important one is that, well, on a national and international level, we don't feel supported on legislation and other support. And working together, we hope to be able to fix that for ourselves. And also, we're all sort of very specialized businesses and organizations, and with a lot of knowledge and experience, and a need for improvement of the quality of seeds and the quantity. So we hope to gain from each other's knowledge in this way. Well, we picked the Linaria catabensis as for our logo. Well, it's a really beautiful flower and it's rather rare in Spain and deserves protection. And Linaria is a common species in Europe, so it sort of represents us all. So far, we made a code of conduct, which is very important to us, expressing how we wish to work, what we wish to strive for in our way of working. You can check out our website. I placed this example of European legislation on this page, in this case concerning the Directive 2010/60, which is all about the derogations made for fodder crop species and some other rules for native seed producers that are sort of really not helpful, counterproductive, really. For example, in fodder crop species, usually some cultivated species is produced, but for us, the wild form is what we need, as wild as possible. And people have decided that we cannot sell more than 5% of the national sales of this particular species every year in your own country, which to me, or to us, sounds like it's not very helpful to natural restoration activities. Well, so far we have 21 members actually, but increasing. We're still working on that very much at the moment. We hope to increase it in the very near future. You can see we're well spread over Europe already. Some corners are missing, so we're really looking forward to people who are willing to join us and have this same idea and ideals for local native seeds. Well, we wish to meet as often as possible and talk about plants and seeds and best practices, how to run your organization, and how to have contact with your local government about standards, and with academia, and just enjoy each other's company. Some pictures. Well, we have a mission statement, very important. Enspa represents the interests of companies and other organizations producing seeds of native European plants for the re-establishment of healthy, resistant, and resilient ecosystems, the reinstatement of ecosystem services, and for landscaping, revegetation, and rehabilitation projects. Enspa aims to help to establish a favorable operating environment for its members, to establish common ethical and quality standards, including by creating a forum for discussion on non-competitive issues, and by providing information to assist the members in their business. We made lots of objectives. We're sort of really ambitious, but we're going to work hard in the coming years to improve all sorts. We wish to be a central representative body to put the views of producers sorry, of native seed of wild origin to government departments and agencies at the local, national and European level, to develop standards of production and ethics in the form of a code of conduct, and so we did. To be a research and statistical center, to aggregate and publish statistics and to provide analysis on native seed production and other relevant market information. To be a technical center, providing commentary, guidance and advice on all legal and other regulatory developments of relevance to native seed production. To encourage and promote seed quality standards and in production and marketing. To provide a forum for the exchange on non-competitive information in production. To promote the native seed production industry by supporting the creation of native seed markets in regions or countries with non-existent or underdeveloped markets, and assisting in the development and organization of the industry in already developed markets. And to encourage applications for funding of collaborative projects among companies and scientific institutions for the improvement of the native seed industry, capability and sustainability, where we hope to meet some of you in the future. It would be very, very nice. So thank you for your attention. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Joannika, for your presentation. And I think Enspa is especially unique among the networks represented here because you're a commercial producers association primarily with other organizations. And of course, you're different countries with all of your issues and legislation, but also within the European Union, which has another layer of laws as well. So thank you, and we look forward to talking more with you in the final discussion period. Next, then, I would like to introduce Sarah Kolpa. She'll be talking to us about the Nevada Native Seed Partnership. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm trying to get my screen up for you all. All right. So, hi, as Stephanie said, I'm Sarah, and I work for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I'm based out of Reno, Nevada. I'm going to give you a very quick introduction today to the Nevada Native Seed Partnership. There are many of us that are a part of this group, but today you get to hear from me. All right, and so just to get us all oriented, since I know we have a global audience, this is a map of the Western US, including the state of Nevada, which I'm going to be talking about. But Nevada is part of the Great Basin, and it is shaded on the map, and you can see it covers most of Nevada as well as portions of California, Oregon, Idaho, and Utah. This area is both known for its arid climate and its basin and range topography. This means that we have wide valleys bordered by parallel mountain ranges, and the term Great Basin also recognizes the hydrographic nature of our landform, as there's no connection from our rivers or streams to the ocean. Some of our most well-known species are sagebrush, which is also the state flower of Nevada, and the sage grouse. And so invasive species and wildfire are the greatest threat to native plants in the Great Basin and Nevada. Fire is a natural part of the Great Basin. However, fires have become more frequent and larger. Typically, fire occurred every 30 to 100 years, but now they're occurring as often as every 5. Cheatgrass is an invasive annual grass, and it is slowly covering more and more of Nevada in the Great Basin. Not only is cheatgrass prolific, it makes fire more likely. Where invasive annual grasses are present, the landscape does not recover from fire on its own, and instead creates a cycle where fire burns the same areas again and again and reduces diverse plant communities to annual grass monocultures. And you can see this depicted in my photos. These grass-fueled fires threaten human safety, degrade wildlife habitat, reduce recreational opportunities, and decrease economic prosperity of these landscapes. With Nevada's distinction as the driest state in the United States, this cycle of disturbance is rapidly limiting biodiversity from our landscapes. This is why native seed is critical to the future health and management of our native plant ecosystems in Nevada and in the Great Basin. And so the use of native plant species in restoration has, over the past 20 years, started to become a major priority for many directions, as federal, state, and local agencies, all the way to the White House, have begun to understand how important native plant diversity and structure are. This is but a few of the policies guiding restoration that's calling for an informed and increased use of native plant materials. So one of these, the National Seed Strategy, was released in 2015. It was developed by the Plant Conservation Alliance, which is made up of 12 federal agencies and over 300 non-federal cooperators. This is a big deal. And to my knowledge, we are the only country with a native national seed strategy, which I'm wondering on this panel of other countries are starting to go that direction. And as I mentioned, I work in Nevada, and the National Seed Strategy was a catalyst for partners throughout the state to start talking about native seed, and we formed the Nevada Native Seed Partnership. Our partnership developed the Nevada Seed Strategy, which is a state-specific step down to the National Seed Strategy. We have 4 goals that focus on seed needs, research, decision tools, and communication, which is similar to the national strategy. And so getting people from multiple agencies and organizations in a room together every month since 2017 to talk about native seed is pretty amazing. But one of the biggest hurdles that we had to overcome together was defining our vision and mission, or essentially why we all kept showing up every month to talk about seed. Why did it matter? What were we working towards? And so one of the first things we did when developing our Nevada Seed Strategy was define our vision and mission. So our vision is to keep Nevada lands diverse and functioning by using the right seed in the right place at the right time. And our mission is that we are a partnership helping Nevada increase the availability of genetically appropriate seed to restore diverse plant communities and sustainable landscapes. All of the agency logos pictured on this page are all part of the Nevada Seed Partnership. Successful implementation of our Nevada Seed Strategy requires coordination within the partnership, as well as with participation of a diverse set of public and private partners. We are working towards achieving 4 goals and 36 specific actions, which are all described in our seed strategy. But partnerships typically don't just form for the fun of it, but to make a change or to address a challenge. And so the Nevada Native Seed Partnership was formed because we believe restoration with native plants is possible and can be improved dramatically. We don't think we have tried everything in terms of restoration practices and are working to address the challenges of successful restoration being difficult, time-intensive, and expensive. Native seed source currently is limited and expensive. We have a volatile seed market. We also have fluctuating weather and a changing climate to deal with. And we have a limited number of growers in Nevada growing native seed. And so there are lots of moving parts needed to address these challenges. And this is something that we are working towards as part of our partnership. So our partnership is chipping away and addressing these challenges through our successes. And so, like I said, we started really getting together since 2017. So we're still pretty much babies in this arena. But we have an economist that's a part of our partnership who has helped us put dollar figures to actions in our strategy. We can now tell our management how much our big ideas cost and work together to secure funding across our agencies and organizations. Different agencies or organizations are better equipped to lead certain conversations or efforts within our Nevada Seed Strategy. And depending on what we are trying to tackle, we lean on the best agency or organization to lead that effort. For example, the Nevada Department of Agriculture is taking the lead on engaging potential Nevada native seed growers and hosts the annual Nevada Native Seed Forum to discuss the science behind native seed and develop strategies to expand the native seed market here in Nevada. We are working with our agency's public affairs staff to share information among partners and collaborators, drawing in and engaging new partners and coordinating things like social media, posts, and news articles. And we're also working to develop a website that will be a one-stop shop for all of information related to Nevada and native seed. We also coordinate all seed collection efforts in the Great Basin so that our seed collectors are collecting target species following the National Seed of Success Protocol. Seed collection crews are funded by the federal agencies in Nevada, but with support for increased collection capacity and source ID coming from our state partners. And of course, we're just working on saving the world one seed at a time, which isn't possible without constant coordination and communication. And so that was fast and furious. Thank you for listening to my spiel on the Nevada Native Seed Partnership. My contact information is on the screen for any further questions that might not be answered during the rest of today's panel.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah, very much. It's really interesting to hear about the specific challenges of the climate, the invasive species, and the fire cycle that your partnership is dealing with there in Nevada. Next, I would like to introduce Stefan Weber. He is going to be presenting on scaling local seed resources with the Ontario Plant Restoration Alliance, also from Canada. Welcome, Stefan.
Hello, I'm just going to figure out how to share my screen here. I think that should be good to go. Let me know if you don't see it. So, hi, today I'm going to be presenting on behalf of the Ontario Plant Restoration Alliance, which is a grassroots volunteer-led organization that is directly inspired by the US Plant Conservation Alliance and all of the great seed strategy work that you're doing. We're actually one of a few Canadian members of the Plant Conservation Alliance. However, I'm also going to be talking about other seed-based restoration projects that I've been involved with over the past 10 years or so. So in Southern Ontario, we are in what's known as the Carolinian Zone, and I work with an organization called Carolinian Canada. And this part of Canada is one of the most biologically diverse, but unfortunately, it's also one of the most fragmented because it's the most densely populated part of Canada. And so the needs of nature are often at odds with the needs of native plants and ecosystems. Now, there are already many organizations that are working to collect and to scale up locally sourced seeds. And these organizations already work together, they learn from each other, they share assets and seeds. But they do this without anything in the way of a formal strategy, formal guidelines, government policies, or even a funding mechanism that's dedicated to seed conservation specifically. So this is just a little infographic to show the local seed production strategy of Ontario's largest native plant nursery, the St. William's Nursery and Ecology Centre, where I worked for about 7 years as a native seed collector. And so, the striking thing is that St. William's is only one of a few bulk seed producers in the province. And there are many benefits that go along with scaling up local plants in terms of seed orchards, including increased capacity for restoration, but it also creates high quality restoration and opportunities for communities to gather around native plants and to learn about native plants. So as a wild type plant producer, we would map remnant populations on the landscape and work with different land managers and conservation agencies across this zone to collect those remnant seeds and to scale them up sort of ex situ in these orchards. Now, here are just some beautiful pictures of the orchards at St. William's Nursery. At one point, we had over 500 different species in storage as seed, and over 200 species scaled up in various seed conservation orchards. Now, many of these were scaled up to provide bulk seed for grassland creation, but others were garden sources to supply seed for greenhouse propagation, for seedling plugs, for potted stock. In some cases, the populations on the nursery farm were larger than any of the local wild populations. And in a few cases, the farmed populations represent the only individuals left in the county. Unfortunately, in this case, they were mowed to death and we've lost them. At this point, I think I would like to give a shout out to some seed conservation leaders in Southwestern Ontario. Biologists Mary Gartshore and Peter Carson have not only spent the last 30 or more years restoring hundreds of hectares of farmland into native prairie, but they've also contributed to the mapping of rare plant populations, remnant populations, and ecosystems in the region. And the wild blue lupin has become a bit of a emblem for restoration in the area. It's a true restoration success story, and some of the best lupin restorations have been done with the Nature Conservancy of Canada and the Long Point Basin Land Trust. But if you go a little bit further into what we call the deep south of Ontario, near Windsor, Sarnia, you'll find some of the best examples of roadside prairie recreation using local sourced seed. And these are projects that were done by Jake Lozon and his colleagues at the Rural Lambton Stewardship Network. Now, there's increasing interest in using native grassland plants along road corridors in urban areas, but there's not a lot of case studies in Ontario for examples of this being really successful. There's also a limited amount of support from the government to use what they see as experimental methods in public infrastructure corridors. However, I've had the opportunity to study roadside restoration for the past 4 years with the McMaster University for part of my PhD work. And we collaborated with the Ministry of Transportation to study best practices, but also to study how pollinator communities respond to these large-scale restorations. However, kind of a more immediate concern and limiting factor is, as many of the other speakers have noted, a lack of supply of genetically appropriate native seed to meet this demand. So for the past few years, Opera has focused on helping inform the industry. We conducted, I believe, the first research market study on the use of native herbaceous plants and seeds in Ontario. And this was followed up in 2021, I believe, by Carolinian Canada's market study, and they did a much more thorough scan of supply and demand across the zone. And also, I want to note that recently, many of the growers in Southern Ontario have aligned together to form a growers association to help advance their collective voice and their collective impact. And right now, we're working with Carolinian Canada, the Growers Association, and many others to pull together a seed strategy for this region. And these are some of the themes that we are aligning around, some shared visions, some shared goals. And our hope is that we will have a functional living document that can help guide us roughly this time next year. So I think maybe like Robert and some others, we're at an early stage in developing a broader network, but we have a lot of folks interested in already building that base. So I'll stop there. Thank you so much for your time and for tuning in, and I'm happy to answer any questions later on. Cheers.
Fantastic, Stefan. Thank you so much for that presentation. And again, we went from Nevada to that part of Ontario that's fairly urban and developed, and saw some different challenges there with extirpation of species. So next, we will have Hector Avila Villegas from Mexico and the company Cosmos, talking about native seed supply for central Mexico. Welcome, Hector. I am going to...
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
I'll get your presentation queued up here.
Thanks. Hello, everyone. My name is Hector Avila. I am a conservation biologist from Mexico, and I'm very happy to be here with you, sharing my experience in the creation of the first native seed supply in central Mexico. My project is located in the state of Aguascalientes, which means hot springs, and which is located about 800 miles from the US-Mexico border. And it is also located in the ancestral lands of the Zacateco people. A little bit of history of my project. In 2017, while I was working for the association Ecosistemica, we received funding from the US Fish and Wildlife Service to create habitat for the monarch butterfly in central Mexico. We created pollinator gardens in high schools of 4 states. We also made a guide on how to make a pollinator garden. And here is where I realized that pollinator gardens are mainly for urban areas and using ornamental plants. So I came with this question: how can I create pollinator habitat outside urban areas and using native species? At this point, I also realized that in my region and perhaps in Mexico in general, there were no wildflower producers, no wildflower seed suppliers, no lists of preferred wildflowers by native pollinators. So I realized that I have to start my own wildflower seed bank in order to create more pollinator habitats. And so in the fall of 2017, I created my first and personal wildflower seed collection, and which I used in 2018 to create seed bombs with the help of a group of volunteers. And I also did germination trials. In 2019, I came across with the book Attracting Native Pollinators by the Cersei Society and made my first wildflower strip at a local farm. Here I'd like to thank and acknowledge my brother Sergio, who gave me the book, the retired professor Javier Hernandez, who is the owner of the El Rosario farm, and he gave me all the facilities to work there. And also Stephanie Frischi from Cersei Society, who has accompanied me in the process of making pollinator habitat. One of the challenges of my project is that Mexican laws have several requirements in order to collect seed from the wild. Some of them are that they ask you to tell them the exact location where seed will be collected, landowners' contact information, landowners' written permits for you, a copy of the land deeds so you prove you are working in a exact place, and some other requirements. Anyway, so I did all this. After 3 years, I got the permits. So I started the seed production at the Rosario farm and started with 8 wildflower species. Here are some views of my cultivation of the wildflowers. I chose species of widely distributed in Mexico because this will allow me to work in several different states without the worries of using alien species. No, they will be native species in there. So I made a seed bank, I collect the seeds, I clean the seeds, and I storage the seeds. So I was ready to create, in last year, I was ready with a strong seed bank to create more pollinator habitat. And then I created Cosmos, which is the first and only wildflower seed producer in Mexico. There is my web page. My idea is to work in different fields like solar farms, conservation projects, agriculture, beekeeping, and also environmental impact mitigation. I think pollinator habitat can do well in all of these fields. For example, this year, well, so far I haven't sold seeds yet, but I got the opportunity to advise a strawberry producer from Michoacan, which is located in Western Mexico, and is one of the main strawberry producers in Mexico. And we're going to create wildflower strips to promote pollinator services in their fields. Finally, for the future, I hope I can create a regional seed supply network, taking advantage of the experience I have acquired in the field, and collecting seeds and working with seeds in general, working with the wildflower strips, creating pollinator habitat, and the experience acquired getting the permits. Okay, so this is my experience. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you in the questions section. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Hector, for sharing your experiences as a single seed producer and really starting a network at the ground level right now. Yeah,
that's right. Thank you. Thank you all.
And then our next and final presenter is Sefra Alexander. She'll be talking about ecotypes, ecoregions, and ecological restoration, fortifying an ecotypic seed production network in the northeastern US. Welcome, Sefra.
Thanks so much, Stephanie, and thanks to you all. It's so encouraging to hear that we all have similar successes and challenges all over the world. So here we are at the Ecotype Project. I'm Sefra Alexandra. I go by the moniker, the Seed Huntress. I've been doing seed conservation work globally and now locally, helping to amplify the amount of ecotypic or truly local native seed in the Northeast United States. So there was a wonderful study that came out of the Mid-Atlantic Regional Seed Bank by Sarah Tangren and Edward Toth, and it was native plant materials use and commercial availability in the Eastern United States. And what this study found was that most native plants that are being used in restoration on the East Coast and the Northeast are really traveling quite a far distance, and their provenance, as has been discussed in other sessions, was really not well known. When they surveyed all of the different industries that use native plants, certainly ecological restoration, pollinator support, wildlife habitat, and you can see the others down below, they 74% of the time were preferring this ecotypic species. And ecotype, for a definition, is a genetically distinct population. So plants that have been adapted over time or are truly locally from the place where they're collected, those wild types. If you think about it like entomological heirlooms, what if we put our bug eyes on what they've been stewarding in the landscape since time immemorial. So when you think about ecotypes, oftentimes in the commercial trade, everyone wants these as the best plant genetic material to utilize, but they don't seem to be available. There is an ever increasing demand. There's a lot of state and federal and even local legislation that's been passing. In terms of the Ecotype project, we started as a pollinator health initiative. They call it, the pollinator apocalypse, and even departments of transportation are finally catching on as they oversee huge swaths of land. And underneath these pollinator health acts, it says, if and when native seed is available, it needs to be utilized. And so the Department of Transportation has been so excited to utilize this ecotypic seed, but it doesn't exist. And so in their efforts to create pollinator corridors, we wanted to help fortify that supply. So again, this map just shows you, the red dots show that ecotypes are really not commercially available in those areas. So it really is a huge need. And so this becomes a supply and demand situation where what we need to do is Ken Green formulated this concept of seed sheds. We need to be able to be producing, collecting, saving, sharing, growing seeds within these certain eco-regional or bioregional areas. We think about watersheds, and now we need to think about seed in their seed sheds. And certainly in the East Coast, we do not have very many wild areas to collect from. It's quite a fragmented landscape with more lawns than wild areas. So we can't, just be doing huge collections out in the wild lands. We had to formulate a different supply chain production system. So what we're using as our framework for this project are the eco-regional level 3 and level 4 maps from the EPA. And we're working with Ecoregion 59 here in the US. And what this is this is just an artistic kind of broad stroke habitat mosaic saying that, again, with our bug eyes on, they don't see where Connecticut, one state ends and another state begins. They see where the riparian corridors are, the broadleaf forests, and so forth. And so what we want to do is if we collect ecotypic seed from Ecoregion 59, we can be pretty sure that we can proliferate it anywhere throughout that ecoregion and know we're putting the right plants in the right place. So we are a farming organization, the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Connecticut. And why is a farming organization caring about seed or caring about pollinators? Well, again, we were putting these on-farm habitats, these on-farm pollinator habitats onto our farms because without these local pollinators there, we don't have local food security. So really these pollinators were paying our local farmers paychecks. But as we went into this process and we had these founder plots, as you see on site, we realized that the real need was to amplify this native seed in the Northeast because no one really had this resource. So it's really interesting. Oftentimes farming, has large scale farming can have really destructive effects on the landscape, but organic farmers have a really unique role to play in the restoration and in conservation. Because if we think about supply chain, we need producers, and producers with growing plant material, well, those are farmers. So what we've done is, this is from the Great Standards for Native Seeds and Ecological Restoration special issue that Restoration and Ecology made. And as you can see, there's this whole supply chain that needs to be addressed, from collection to processing to growing out and so forth. And so we said, because this supply chain just isn't existing in the East Coast right now, how do we support this and recreate this? And so what we did is we put together a roundtable of experts from all throughout the Northeast who were doing different parts of that and saying, in a needs assessment, what are we missing? What do we need to do? And what we did, sorry, I'm going fast, 7 minutes goes quickly. What we did is we created this cycle. So where botanists using SOS protocols will wild collect the seed, organic farmers grow them out on founder plots with 200 plants for each species. The seed savers come in and collect it. The nursery growers then propagate that organically grown seed, and then we get it to the nursery trade, and our pollinators are thriving with what they need. And to make that happen, we actually had to go out and find the botanists and the farmers and the seed collectors and get nursery partners and so forth. And we are still looking for many more botanists because there really aren't that many field botanists. And so that's been a real challenge to get more species in production. So these are the species that we're working with currently. They're mostly upland meadow. It's really predicated on how much funding we have, because you see through the whole cycle, the more funding we have, the more species we can run through that, and we can amplify them and get them onto these beautiful founder plots. So again, these start out as 200 plugs of each of the species, put in rows as you would cultivate other farm crops. And we're able to collect millions of seed off of these founder plots. Seeds are a fruit, and so they obviously have their right harvest time. Just like there was the whole local food movement, now we're really helping to support the local seed movement. And to do that and to get more farmers on board, because we've had to narrow to the farmers, all of the land trusts and pollinators, everyone wants to participate, but we're really focusing on who can really amplify these seeds right now. We created these getting started protocol cards that tell you the plant characteristics, their ecological benefits, how to stratify their seed, what the seed looks like. And that's really helped us bring on a whole bunch of organic farmers in the urban, suburban, and rural areas. Again, extremely important to have these crops on farm, but also this is an amazing value-added seed crop, as we've talked about with the never-ending supply. As I run out of time here, we have these cards so that we can be creating a community of practice around this as this group grows. And here we have the great success of ecotypic organic seed. And, you know, we really want this socially conscious brand to promote education and awareness around knowing the provenance and knowing the importance of having truly local native seed and preserving those great arcs of wild diversity that happen in our landscape, to reduce fragmentation and fortify our ecological corridors. And again, having a really great value-added crop that can serve the restoration and conservation communities, because there's just hardly any resource for that around here. And to do that, we really are looking to create a seed collective. This is the Great Winnow Wizard, which really helps us clean a lot of our species, but still some of the species with papaces on it, we have to collaborate with other organizations. So what we're trying to do is create a replicable model for other ecoregions and also bring together all the strategic partners to fulfill that whole supply chain. We are working on a set of standards and protocols, again, adapting the SOS protocols so that we know that the seeds sustainably wild collected, organically grown, then in the nurseries using OMRI certified organic soil. And then so the end users can understand the quality that they're getting, and we can also make sure that the supply is meeting the demand as we go forward. To end, again, honoring the riparian corridors of those who were there before us. This is, I took the botanical expedition, an 87-mile journey down the Connecticut River, an Algonquin word that means the long tidal river. Again, honoring that this is the courseway that these seeds have been proliferated through by all the great ockeries, hydrockery by water, anthropockery, seed dispersal by human, myrmockery by ants. And it's really, once we can put these native plants back where they belong, once they're back in the landscape, so many of the natural seed dispersal mechanisms will help us do this restoration work naturally. So thank you so much, and look forward to the panel.
Fabulous, Sephra. Thank you very much for covering so much in
I went as
7
quick
minutes.
as I could.
I know, it's great. And I apologize, I mispronounced your name. It's Alexandra, Sephra Alexandra.
My twin brother's Alexander, so we're
okay, gotcha. Great. That gets us through our lightning round. We went around the world and talked about a lot of different seed network related topics. Now we can shift into our discussion and panel section of today's workshop. I am joined by Nancy Shaw. She is the current president of the board of the International Network for Seed-Based Restoration. She's going to help me moderate our discussion here. If any of you out there that are attending, you have questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat and we'll get them to the correct presenter. That way, you can also use that raise hand function, and we can call on you and unmute you, and then you can actually speak, and we can have something that's a bit more conversational as well. So I'll just go ahead and start here with the first question that's in the Q&A. This looks like it's directed to Sarah Culpa. And the question is, wondering what challenges you face coordinating funding between federal and state agencies when there is an opportunistic collection to be made. How often do you meet to coordinate budgets, and how do you protect these against repurposing for other agency issues?
Okay, you're gonna have to help me, Stephanie, because I can't see that. So,
Okay.
Can you read the first part of that question?
First question is a question about the challenges to coordinate funding between federal and state agencies, especially when there's an opportunistic collection to be made.
So coordinating fund, I feel like this is two different parts. So funding is separate from seed collection, right? So we work together in the different agencies to make sure we get funding secured for our Seeds of Success crews, either through interagency agreements or cooperative agreements or contracts. And so we know going into that year, like, so we usually can secure funding for seed collection crews. So say that, I'll give an example. So last year I secured funding for seed collection crews in 2019 so that I could fund crews starting in 2020. And so we can work within those crews to help if there is an opportunistic collection to make that collection. But in terms of funding, since the federal funding cycle is different than the state funding cycle, which is different than the nonprofit funding cycle, we just kind of have to know when those all are and just start talking, I would say early in the year about big projects that we want to go after. And I would say our strength as a partnership is actually having that business plan and having economists work with us so that we could actually say to our supervisors, well, look, this is like the 5-year projection of what this money can be used for. You're muted, Stephanie.
Yes, thank you. Great, that was the first part of that question. The second piece was, how often do you meet to coordinate budgets, and how do you protect those against repurposing for other agency issues?
So our partnership meets monthly. And so if any budget stuff comes up, then we'll talk about it. But we also just email each other or text or chat if we know something's coming. So I feel like we've gotten to a point in our partnership where we all have really good, like we have a good working relationship. And so we're able to just quickly pivot if someone's like, hey, we think this is coming down, this funding is coming down. Let's all talk about it. And in fact, our partnership is meeting this afternoon and we are having this exact conversation because there could be a possible big funding opportunity that we're trying to pivot and secure.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Again, if any panelists want to add anything, please raise your hand or just jump in here too. Nancy, I'll keep watching the Q&A. We've got another one here. How do the seed networks deal with species that have a short seed viability? Do you collect seed on a as needed basis?
Well, I could start on that.
Go ahead, Eduardo.
We don't work with recalcitrant seeds at the beginning because we tried and it wasn't successful. But one species we could work with it. It's a palm, Arecaceae, and it's very recalcitrant. But the indigenous people taught us that we could keep it inside the water of the rivers in a bag where the water can pass through, and the seed, and then we can store the seeds for a year inside the water. And when you take it off the water, it will germinate fine. And that was a recent study, not published yet, but it came from the traditional knowledge. So there is a way to work with each species of these short viability types, but we still have a long way of understanding it.
Yeah, if I guess one question is first to identify if you're working with a truly recalcitrant species or a species that has some dormancy and can be stored. And then given that information, what specific storage environmental requirements would be best as well. Would anyone else on the panel like to answer that question about working with species that have shorter storage lifespans? Okay. Let's see, got one more. Looks like we've got those covered. Nancy, do you want to go ahead and?
No, I was wondering, I was going to ask Robert Sessions, do you have a certification program in Canada for native seeds? You were talking about problems with ID.
Yeah, we don't necessarily have any certification program. So when a harvester collects native seed and they want to put it on the open market, they pass it through a company that then certifies the seed as the species they say it is. They identify any noxious weeds that may be incorporated in there and do a germination or viability analysis for that seed. So that's the normal seed certification process. There are complications with that because there have been misidentifications of species they found within that seed mix that's being collected. So, and also in that process, there's no, it's not regulated necessarily. So there's no indication of provenance where that seed was grown or harvested. So we have to just kind of cross our fingers. And also there's no indication if that's a cultivar or an ecovar or anything like that. So it could be June grass, Calaria macrantha from, we've had it come from Iceland before and being trying to sold in our region. So I don't think that's appropriate. That's one of our major issues is improving that that certification process. And we have, in September, we have invited some of those companies to come and present to our group. And so we can talk about that issue and just see what they think as well.
Is this a private company or nonprofit that does the certification? Or?
No, they're all for-profit companies. And typically they're more for the agricultural industry. So for crop seed stuff, and they do native stuff on the side, so to speak.
So they're not familiar with the species then, perhaps, too.
And I'll just add, Melissa Spearing has added a comment here that there are only 6 native grass species legislated and regulated by Canada's Seed Act.
Right.
So I think that's comparable somewhat to what we've heard from the European Native Seed Producers Association. Have a lot of these legal frameworks that are really designed and started around agricultural or forage and fodder species. And then those of us working with native species are either trying to fit into that framework. That's not always quite the right fit, or like develop parallel separate policy and legislation for native species.
That's been our trajectory here in the United States too. I was wondering, do you have any seed co-ops in Canada where groups can get together that need seed?
I think there might be, there are a few growers that do grow native seeds. They harvest them themselves. This is for more of the flower garden market type thing. So they do, you can go to certain greenhouses and find native species, but it's not a huge market. So, and I don't know of any like seed swaps. I guess that's what we're trying to create in a sense is a formalized seed swap.
I think it's great how Brazil has created some good market connections so that growers and
and I like the mention before of having what was it? Sorry, I'm reminding myself. A business plan and having like an expert on supply chains. I thought that was an excellent idea, and someone that can sort of analyze the whole program and see where the linkages are, the weaknesses are. I think that was excellent. And we're very very envious of the BLM and the Seeds of Success program that you have in the US, and that was kind of the inspiration for a lot of what we're trying to do. And maybe in 20 years we might have one in Canada, but we'll see.
that's still a big problem here, trying to coordinate what is landed and what is being grown and the sources of those seeds. I think it's everybody's problem probably.
Yeah, right.
So we want to remind everyone we've got 15 minutes left here. I've got 2 questions in the Q&A we can get to, and maybe in the meantime, I'll just follow up with Sephra, please, on that certification question. You know, certification is sometimes related to seed quality or seed identity, and it can also be related to the provenance or, you know, the location that the wild population came from. With the Ecotype project, how are you looking at who's going to be that third party certifier, if anyone?
So that's exactly the types of things that we've come to now, as we need a formalized sheet to, maybe you all have one that tracks provenance, and really for each of our different collectors and our producers, we're creating those standards, and we have a researcher right now who's interviewing different folks and different models who have done this similar sort of thing to see what the most effective process is to go through this. But I actually kind of look to you all on this panel if you have any advice as to how we should go about that, because we're kind of making the road as we walk it, it seems like, even though we've, you know, talking to brilliant people who are doing this work over here. So I guess I'm just reposing that question.
Well, yeah, let's stay in touch, you know, online, but outside of this workshop, and we can continue to brainstorm and talk about some of those ideas. One that might just be real quick here is thanking everyone for their presentations. And then there's a general question. Does anyone have experience or connections to Africa, seed suppliers or networks, and specifically Ethiopia?
No, unfortunately.
I mean, yeah, we're always encouraging and trying to reach out to make more connections across Africa with the Society for Ecological Restoration. We've had some contact with what was more rangeland restoration for livestock production in Ethiopia. Stephanie, you're the Stephanie who posted this question. If you want to follow up with us by email, I can give you that contact information. It may or may not lead anywhere, but it could be a start.
And I could mention too that we do, the International Network for Seed-Based Restoration does have an ambassador now in Africa. He's in South Africa, but we could contact him to see if he might help with that.
Great.
And there is Seed Balls Kenya, I think it's in activity.
Seed Balls Kenya, yep, another group working in Eastern Africa. Let's see, has the development of target or priority species lists been helpful in strengthening the supply chain in your respective regions? This is a question for anyone who would like to take it.
I can take that one, I think. So I think that actually is what got our partnership started, was realizing we needed to have a unified message of what species we wanted to use in restoration, which ones we wanted our seeds of success teams to go after, and that in turn would be the ones that would be going out for increase. And so we worked with a bunch of the botanical folks within the Great Basin, and we kind of had conversations about what species we should go after. So our seeds of success crews do have a target species list that they go after every year. It's typically 6 native grasses and 6 native forbs. And that's what we then convert over to have increased. And so this was all like our choices were all informed by science. Nancy Shaw and company, they have a really great book on native forbs that are coming out with all the research that Rocky Mountain Research Station and the Great Basin Native Plant Project has done over the last 20 years. And so using some of the info in that helped drive what forb species were our targets. They needed to be ones that were needed across the Great Basin, ones that we could get genetically appropriate seed for certain portions of the Great Basin for, and Nevada in general. And so that I would say that really helped us align, so that when we did have Nevada native seed forums, when we were trying to say, hey, alfalfa growers of Nevada, or hey, these other crops that you're growing, if you're interested in trying native seed, these are the types of species we're looking at. You know, we had to pick ones that weren't going to be intimidating to a grower first starting off, you know, and so the grasses seem to be species that aren't intimidating from the get-go. And some of our forb species maybe are a tiny bit intimidating, but at these seed forums, we talk about the science behind, you know, the biology and phenology of these species. And I think it's just a way for us to have us united, but also have a united front when approaching, you know, the private sector and growers. And I'm not sure if anyone else on this panel has target species lists they go after for that same reason or different reasons.
I can speak in our region that we are just starting that horizon scan of what type of species we'll be needing, like what type of restoration projects are coming up. So we do have that species list that as a whole we are striving for. We focus on about the same idea, like 6 or 10 native grasses, and pretty much any forbs we can get our hands on, we will take them.
Yeah, I could say that we don't follow any priority list of species, but we do prioritize from the ground. So what the communities, indigenous communities, think it's important that we plant on restoration projects. So what are the important species for the ecosystems to recover, and also for the economic use or cultural uses of those species. So we make a list of species from the collectors, and then we see what type of restoration, which projects those species could fit, and then we offer that to whoever needs to do ecological restoration. And then we do we work on a demand basis. Then we need to have a client contracting us. Then we're going to start collect those species.
From the ecotype project's perspective, we've been working with species that we thought people around here would be most familiar with, just because we've had to kind of prove the demand for it with our nursery growers, bringing them on as partners after we've produced the seed. So to ensure that once the nurseries had these plug starts, that there would be interest from the landscapers around here and the homeowners. So we really started with kind of the showier, more common ones, and that was the way that we were able to prove the nurseries in our plant sales. They all sold out of all the ecotypes that they had, and now the nurseries and the botanists and the farmers are all interested in expanding our species list. So
okay, we just got oh, go ahead, Robert.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to add that our work with the Piikani and Kainai Nation, that we are also focusing as a group on helping them find traditional or culturally important plants as well that they need for their own uses. So not necessarily a restoration side, but just on the cultural importance side.
Yeah, the ethnobotanical side.
Yeah.
We just got over 5 minutes left to go here. Anne has her hand raised, and she also added a bit more information about the Alberta Seed Cooperative. That I put that information in the chat, saying that was developed by industry to deal with genetically appropriate species for restoration of oil sand, mining disturbances. Thank you for that, Anne. And then we've got one other question here in the Q&A, and I also want to make sure Joannika and Hector and Stefan have a chance to add anything else as well. But this question is, for long-lived tree species, many organizations consider within population assisted migration as a climate adaptation strategy. And in the future, this may even be true for species with shorter lifespans. But the question is then, for the species that you manage, do you see concerns with this practice? So yeah, we've talked about kind of local ecotype and knowing where the original genetics or population evolved in, and then often that can be determined by the end user, if they use that locally or if they're looking for a seed source from a somewhat different climate in order to match potential future climate scenarios. Any opinions or perspectives on this question?
That from my perspective, that's definitely a question that that is in people's minds, but we haven't, I don't think we've developed an answer to that question yet. So we're just focusing right now on having that local genotype for use locally. And we are being challenged on why we're planting species that may not be able to be adapted to climate change. So that's sort of an outstanding question that we don't have an answer to yet. So maybe I should be looking at species from, I don't know, Colorado or southern Montana, but I don't have an answer. That's a very good question.
If anyone else on the panel wants to add, I can just say from here, because our landscapes are already so fragmented, we're doing the best we can to help maintain those wild arcs of diversity that still exist. Because as research botanists have said, seeds, my mentor took a cell phone and a seed. He said, which one it has better technology? And it's the seed, because they can adapt to whatever's out there. So as long as we're helping to proliferate as much of that diversity as possible, then hopefully somewhere in one of those seeds, they'll be able to adapt naturally. So that's what we're hoping for.
Yeah. That's great.
And yeah, I encourage everyone, we've got another INSR workshop in an hour and a half, continuing on about seed standards and making those a commercial reality. There are also several presentations next week that have to do with this question of provenance and climate and assisted migration. So I encourage you to check the schedule for those. We just have 2 minutes left here, so I'm just gonna clear the floor for Joannika.
I'd like to say something. For me, as a starter in this field, I really have more questions than answers. But somehow I came out in this way, and now I'm producing native seeds of wildflowers. No, so to me it's been as a panelist, but I've learned a lot here. I have many questions. I'm in diapers here, no, and I hope I can make this project grow. I don't know how the Mexican government has no programs or funding for this kind of projects yet, but I'm gonna still working on that, and I hope somehow I can make it grow. And I hope we can get in touch with you all and with the audience and share experiences and information. That'll be, thank you.
Thank you, Hector. We appreciate your energy and enthusiasm and participation in the panel as well. Yeah. Joannika, any other thoughts or things you would like to share?
Yes, well, this has been very a lot to learn for us as well. Like I said, we have just gotten started with Enspa, and well, we're not all commercial. I mean, there's people who started out from a university initiative or some foundation still in progress, but it will have similar goals. I guess that's the most important part. How to get this high quality local native seed and upscale the production, which is a real challenge. Yeah, we have a lot to learn still. And it's a lot about communication and organization also, which is a challenge. And since everybody is always so incredibly busy, it's hard to develop quickly enough because we feel it's so urgent. I think that's a very important message. And we all feel this urgency, but it's you can only run so hard.
Well, thank you. I think we've reached time here. And of course, yeah, we've got a lot more work to do and a lot more conversations to have. So again, INSR, we welcome you to join our section within SER and reach out to myself or Nancy, and we can connect you with the other panelists here. So thank you again, everyone, for your time and input. And Have a good rest of your morning, day, or afternoon, wherever you are.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Great to meet you all.
Good luck.
Bye.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Bye.
Bye.